All right. The second video here, we're going to talk about starting the accrual budget. So what we want to do with an accrual budget is record when we think revenue is going to be earned and expenses incurred. It's not necessarily when money changes hands. So we've got ourselves a very nice looking assumptions page here. Eventually, when we're done, we're going to have 3 sheets. The second sheet is going to be the accrual budget. What we want to do is click on the little plus icon here to add a second sheet. This will be our accrual budget. The first thing we want to do on every sheet, we want to have in the upper left-hand corner is the 3-line header. Here, what I'm going to do, since I already have a 3-line header from my assumptions page, I'm going to select those 3 cells and type Control C. Some people would also do right click and click copy, and then go over to our second sheet and right click and type paste or Control V. And we've got our 3-line header, Bill's Fish Market, the assumptions page, fiscal year 2016. But this is not the assumptions page. This is going to be our accrual budget. So we want to change the name of the sheet from assumptions to accrual budget. And great, now we've got our 3-line header. Now, when I do budgets, I like the different line items on the budget, like, revenue and expenses and net income and all that. I like them to be on different rows here. And that means in the different columns, I like to see the different columns be the different months of the year. We're doing a annual budget starting in January going through December. So I want column B to be January, C, February, and so on. So what I'm going to do is in cell B5 here, I'm going to type January. Now, you could watch me type February, March, April, and so on here. But one kind of neat trick is Excel can figure out what you're trying to do here. So you know how when we copy a formula, we take our cursor, this big plus sign, and we move it to the bottom right of a cell, and then we left click and drag to copy the formula. You can also do that with months. So if we move the cursor to get to be the skinny plus sign here in the bottom right of the cell that's got January, if I left click and then hold and then drag the cursor over all the way to M is December, and then I let go, look at that. It automatically, enters February, March, April, and so on. So hopefully that will save you some time. Now you see we've got some columns are a little too short here. We'll fix that in a second. But first I want to just make sure everybody sees how we can nicely get our 12 columns up. And again, column A is going to be things like, revenue and expenses and stuff, but starting in B through M, we've got the months. Now, I could increase the size of all the columns here, but another thing I like to do is, some of the months are kind of wide, the names of the months, like, September, November, and they take up a lot of space. And so what I like to do is have these names kind of set off to an angle. So with January here, what I can do is this button here called the orientation button. If I click on that and then select angle counterclockwise, it has January going, from the bottom left to the upper right here. And that saves a little space. And if I do that with all the months, what I can do is I can select the month or the cell with February in it, hold down the shift key, left click the cell with December in it, and then I can change the orientation for all of them. And to me, that just looks a little nicer, saves a little space. We don't need September to be, quite so wide, depending on what kind of, numbers we've got in here. But this is a pretty simple budget, so I don't think we'll need very much. But so now we've got that. Another thing that we want to do here is the 3-line header should actually not be centered over just A and B like we had in the assumptions page, but it should be centered over all 12 months. So what I want to do is, select the cell that's got Bill's Fish Market, the first line, and then hold down the Shift key and click, selected the wrong key. Hold down the Shift key and select cell M1. Now I've selected them all, and I can hit the merge and center. I actually have to hit it twice to get it to merge and center, and I'll explain why in a second here. Let me do it with the second one. The second row, select that, hold the Shift, and then click on M2, and it selects all of them. Now you see here, A2 and B2 are already merged, so when I click the merge and center button the first time, it unmerges those two, and then if I select it again, it merges A through M. So just a little detail. And great. So now I've got a 3-line header that goes over all 3. I can embiggen here with my zoom button down here in the bottom right. Make it a little easier to read. I've got my months, January through December. I've got my column A for my different line items, and it's looking pretty good. Some people will add color. They might add some fill to the 3-line header. They might make, each month a different color or something fancy like that. If you want to do that, you know how to do that. That's great. I'm not going to go through it, but it's a nice thing to do. So now that we've gotten our columns, let's take a look at, well, what kind of rows do we want? Well, there's 2 main sections of a budget. The first is our revenue. So I'm going to have a header here for our revenue. In the example of Bill's Fish Market, they only have one source of revenue, and that is sales. And then after we're going to calculate for each month, January, February, so on, we're going to calculate how much sales they have. And then we want to subtract off their cost of goods sold. If we take our sales and then subtract off our cost of goods sold, what does that result in? Well, that is going to be our gross profit. And it's very important for business managers to keep track of their gross profit, because that's one measure of how efficient a manager is how large their gross profit is in relation to their sales. A very efficient manager keeps their cost of goods sold as low as possible, which means it maximizes their gross profit. A less efficient manager has a smaller gross profit because their cost of goods sold is higher. So in any case, that's our first section of the accrual budget is going to be our revenue. Next, we're going to list all of our expenses. So I've got a header here for expenses. And in this particular budget, I like to divide the expenses into 2 different categories, fixed expenses and variable expenses. So let's first list the fixed expenses. Let me widen the A column here so it's a little more readable before we continue. I'm sure I'll expand it some more later. But what do we mean by fixed expenses? Well, fixed expenses are expenses that are incurred every months or some months, but they do not vary with production. All right. So if you read the instructions for this exercise, advertising is a fixed amount per month. Depreciation, fixed amount per month. Utilities and insurance. These are all expenses that, whether I sell 1 fish or 1,000,000 fish, my expense is the same that month. Does not vary depending on production. All right, that's all of the fixed expenses that I could identify in the instructions. So once I've got them all, I want to total them up. So I'm going to have a line that says total fixed expenses. And sure enough, I need to widen my A column again. What do I, after my total fixed expenses, then I want to start listing my variable expenses. And what are my variable expenses? Well, the first one I've got is sales commission. How much am I going to pay in sales commission? Well, I'm going to pay 5% of whatever my sales. So that obviously varies depending on how much I sell. If I sell zero, I'm going to have zero sales commissions. If I sell $1 million, I'm going to have a lot of sales commissions, which is not the worst problem in the world to have. So that fits under the category of variable expenses. The second variable expense that I see is supplies. If you remember back when we did the assumptions, we've got supplies has a fixed component and it also has a variable component. In the instructions it says that they're going to budget $200 a month plus 1% of sales for their supplies expense. So it does vary with production or sales. So it's a variable expense. Technically, it's a semi-variable expense because part of it is fixed, part of it is variable. For simplicity, I'm just going to lump the semi-variable expense in with my variable expense. But now I believe that's all my variable expenses. And so now I'll be able to have a line that says total variable expenses. And again, I'm going to widen my A column. Do I have any other categories of expenses? No, that's all. I've got my fixed, I've got my variable. So at this point, when I fill in the budget or the numbers over here, the formulas to calculate the numbers, I'll be able to calculate total expenses. How will I do that? Well, I'm going to add up my fixed expenses plus my variable expenses is going to equal to my total expenses. That's another video. Next video, we'll do the formulas. Now that I've got my gross profit and my total expenses, I can have a line that says net income. Is this total net income? No. First, I want to show net income before tax. Most people like to see their net income before tax and have the income tax broken out separately. And it's important to note this is net income before income tax. You might have other taxes in your expenses, things like real estate taxes, sales taxes, payroll taxes. All those are going to be other expenses. And then we're going to have net income before income tax. And then we're going to say less income tax. And we will calculate that for each month. And then our next line is going to be net income after tax. And we're almost done with our rows. The last thing we want to have is you can see in the instructions it says, we're going to calculate our net income before or net income after tax for every month, January through December. But I also want to see our total. I want to see all, January through December totaled up. So we're going to have a one cell here, something like 2016 total net income after tax. Or you might call that, 2016 total profit or loss or something like that. But it's going to be one number that basically just adds up all of those numbers. Again, it's probably hard to see here without having any numbers in, but hopefully it'll become clearer when we do the formulas that you're going to want all of these rows. So how does this look so far? Well, all right, I think we've got every category here. This is not, though, the most readable budget in the world here. We could do things to make it a little easier for people to read. First thing we could do here is we're going to have numbers for sales and cost of goods sold and gross profit and stuff. But things like revenue, that's just a header to kind of separate off the revenue from the expense portion of the budget. So why don't I put those in bold, revenue and expenses in bold. Another thing I can do here is I've got sales and then I've got less cost of goods sold. I can use the increase indent button here. I can click that. Maybe I'll click it a couple times to indent it a little bit. And you can see here that, oh, okay, sales and then less cost of goods sold is indented. So when I calculate gross profit here, it kind of makes it clear that I'm taking sales minus cost of goods sold. Similarly, with that indent, you can see I've got fixed expenses, and then I've got four things that fit under the category of fixed expenses. So why don't I go ahead and indent those too? So advertising, depreciation, I'm going to indent two at once here. Again, what I did is I selected this cell and then I left-clicked and dragged down to select the cell below it. Hit the increase indent there. And now you can see that, oh, okay, so these four things fit under fixed expenses. Similarly, under variable expenses, I select the two cells that are variable expenses, indent those, and now you can see at a glance that they fit under variable expenses. So that helps with readability a little bit. What else can I do here? Well, hopefully you all remember that anytime you have a total or do a calculation like here where we're taking one number minus another number, we want to have underlining, and we actually don't want to use the underline key here. Technically speaking, what we want is a bottom border, so this button right here. So let me select cells A1, or I'm sorry, A8 through M8, and your row numbers may differ. You know, you may have started here, but in my example, I've got the less cost of goods sold in row 8. And then I'm going to select the bottom border button. And again, when we have numbers here, then you'll see that we're going to calculate the gross profit by taking, for January, by taking the sales for January minus the cost of goods sold for January. And the fact that we're doing a calculation there, subtraction, that line is helpful to indicate that. Similarly, after we list our insurance expense, we're going to have a calculation for total fixed expenses. So I'm going to want a bottom border there. We're going to have a calculation for total variable expenses after supplies, so I'm going to want a bottom border there. After I have the total variable expenses, I'm going to calculate total expenses. After calculating total expenses, I'm going to calculate net income before tax, and I'm going to calculate subtract off the income tax, and then I'm going to have net income after tax. The net income after tax is kind of the bottom line of this budget, and so instead of the single bottom border underlining here, I'm going to want a double bottom border, the double underlining. And again, don't use the underline button, use the border button. Here though, to get the double bottom border, I've got to left click on the drop down box here and select bottom double border. So now you can see, once we have numbers in here, again, it'll look better, but you can see that the net income after tax, which is our profit or loss for each month, will have the bottom double border here. Also here, where we have the total, we're going to have a, add up January through December. Let's go ahead and bottom double border that one. So now it looks like that. Well, how does that look? Well, it looks pretty good. Again, very hard to imagine what it's going to be with numbers filled in, but we'll do that in the next video. But for now, I think we've got pretty good looking formatting here. The last thing that I want to do, don't forget, is to rename the sheet. Again, sheet 2 is not the best name for a sheet. You want to name it something that indicates, that's more meaningful. In this case, I'll call it the accrual budget. So now we've got two sheets. We've got the assumptions sheet and we've got the accrual budget sheet. Our next video, we're going to go through and actually use formulas to calculate all of these rows for each month. And you might be thinking like, gee, John, you're taking so long setting this up, and some of you will just want to have gotten in and done formulas right away, and that's one way of doing it. I think it makes sense to kind of ahead of time kind of sketch out, and often what I'll do is literally on paper take a pencil and kind of sketch out how I want the spreadsheet to look before I get worried about formulas and stuff like that. So right now I think we've got the appearance of the accrual budget sketched out. Again, before I do too much work, I'm going to want to save. However, instead of hitting the save button here, what you want to do is go back to the first sheet, the assumptions sheet, and select cell A1 and then do the save. If you don't do that, Excel will open up on whatever sheet you have saved on and whatever cell you have saved in. So if you're scrolled down here and you're like in column F and row 59 and you hit save now, and then you email it to somebody or you submit it in Blackboard as a homework assignment, whoever opens up the file, this is what they're going to open up to. And they're going to think you sent them an empty spreadsheet, and it's going to be really annoying. So I always encourage people, scroll all the way up, select the sheet that you want the reader to open up to. In our case, it's going to be you want people to see the assumptions page first. And so select the assumptions page, click on cell A1, and then hit the save button. All right, so now we have filled out the format for what the accrual budget is going to look like. I'm going to stop this video now, and the next video will actually add the formulas for the accrual budget.